Welcome to Model United Nations Flipped Classroom. This is part 2 for setting the stage for Model United Nations. Let's begin by taking a look at the history behind Model United Nations. So we'll start at the beginning. And in the beginning, it's the League of Nations, which comes before the United Nations. The League of Nations was an organization established in 1920, and it was headquartered in Geneva. But it had many weaknesses. One of the main weaknesses is the United States did not join. Also, member nations that did join could easily quit. Also, if one of the members was kicked out, it really had no impact. Finally, another weakness was the League of Nations did not involve themselves in domestic issues. There was no power to resolve internal issues within one of the nations. But one of the greatest challenges overall was the need for a unanimous vote. Getting all members to agree was virtually impossible. And since the goal of the League of Nations was to make the world a more peaceful place, another problem was that the League of Nations did not prohibit war, and it was not strong enough to prevent the punishment of aggressive states. Overall, the League of Nations members failed to uphold their commitment to the principle of collective security. In other words, they failed to make the world a more peaceful place. That is why the United Nations was needed. World citizens were desperate for international cooperation to stop war after they witnessed the horrors of World War I. The Versailles Peace Treaty included the League of Nations, which, as mentioned previously, the United States did not join. So, as a result, the United Nations was created. Its ideas built upon the 1941 Anglo-American Atlantic Charter. Great powers known as the Big Four were the foundation. The Big Four are the United States, the United Kingdom, the Soviet Union, and China. Member nations could keep national sovereignty, and they could protect national interest, which was very appealing for nations to join. In 1945, 50 state delegations, in other words, 50 nations, signed the Charter of the United Nations. What is the Charter of the United Nations? It's basically the Constitution. It's a document that lays out the goals, the purpose, the functions, and duties of the United Nations. It explains membership rights and obligations of the members. Also, it details the amendment process in case changes need to be made. The purpose and principles of the United Nations Charter is to ensure the sovereignty of all states. Also, it's a promise to refuse aid to charter violators. In other words, if one of the member nations violates some of the rules set forth in the Charter, the other nations could refuse to help that member. Also, one of the principles is to always settle differences peacefully, and no threats or war to limit territory or independence. Non-members would also need to follow the Charter to ensure peace. UN Charter membership. If you look at the chart, you can see that membership has increased over the years. As of 2011, there was 193 member states. But notice how there have been 5 permanent members, and the rest have joined after. We'll explain this more during future sessions. Next, we'll look at the principal organs. The General Assembly, the Economic and Social Council, the Security Council, the International Court of Justice, specialized agencies, intergovernmental organizations, and non-governmental organizations. Let's start with the structure. Take a look at the chart, and you will see how the General Assembly is the core, followed by the other parts, the International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court, Economic and Social Council, Security Council, which is basically the peacekeeping Secretary General, and all the special agencies. The Security Council is basically the member states that have the resources to keep world peace. The General Assembly is where everybody joins together for deliberations and debates. There are many subcommittees, and we'll talk about that in the next flipped classroom, because the subcommittees draft and vote on proposals for action that to put on the General Assembly agenda. The General Assembly meets for about 3 months a year, September to December. This does not include the special sessions. And also, the General Assembly follows democratic rules. Some of the topics addressed by the General Assembly include international peace and security, regulations of arms, the function of the UN. Also, the General Assembly can ask for research, look for peaceful settlements. They deal with the budget, membership, and amendments. The Economic and Social Council coordinates and develops programs. These programs deal with social issues, educational, and health issues. The primary focus is human rights. The Trustee Council has not been active since 1994. Basically, they would promote human rights and freedoms in former colonies or current colonies, but they had no enforcement power. The International Court of Justice mediates disputes. They also interpret treaties. States have to agree on the International Court of Justice to use it before it will actually get involved. There are 15 justices who serve 9-year terms, which are renewable. The Secretariat, or known as the Secretary General, administers all the UN programs. They also conduct the research. To be the Secretary General, you have to be loyal to the United Nations, not your specific nation. The Secretary General usually serves a 5-year term and can be re-elected. There's also, under the United Nations Charter, a miscellaneous section. This deals with other issues such as when treaties are signed and not allowing secret deals, and the concept that the United Nations Charter overrides any treaties that member states can make. Now you know the basics. So what's your next step? Reread pages 1 through 30 in the Model United Nations Student Handbook. Ask questions and actively engage in Model United Nations preparation activities. This is the conclusion of Flipped Classroom for Setting the Stage, Part 2.